very fortunate today to have with us Professor Hugo Romero, Department of Geography, University of Santiago, Chile, with us. And I think Chile is, for many European geographers, almost an unknown country, virtually. Very happy that you're here. I'd like you to tell us how you became a geographer, and finally, how it is for geography in Chile these days.
Well, thank you, Anne. I came to geography only a few years ago. I began to study first history, because in my country, most of the people who works in geography were looking for a position in teacher mainly, teaching.
Yeah.
And history and geography is one of the possibilities at the universities. But when I was studying, I had some professors who have been very important in my career. One of them was Professor Orlando Peña, who is now working in Canada. Mm-hmm. Another was Professor Cesar Caviedes, who is now working in Florida, United States. And other was Professor Schneider, who is now in Australia.
Oh my.
Then I was working mainly as assistant in some matters and subjects such as climatology and natural resources. And I think that in my country, and perhaps in all Latin America, most of the geographers studied the subject mainly working with the professors.
I see. So not in formal courses?
No, yes. Yeah. There is. They are not in formal courses. Mm-hmm. At least when I was beginning my career. Mm-hmm. Now perhaps there are some other opportunities, more formal opportunities. And my personal vision of geography was mainly a sort of French geography. Uh-huh. Because during the 60s and perhaps earlier, some French geographers were working in my country, mm-hmm. especially Professor Tricard and Geneva, mm-hmm. and some people who introduced in my country, especially a sort of regionalism. Mm-hmm. Then I think that most of us were interested at that time in regional monographies. Uh-huh. And however, some sort of frustration was with us. Mm-hmm. Not perhaps because that point of view, but mainly because we realized that we didn't have enough ideas, enough concepts to explain our reality.
I see.
And then we realized that a sort of description of the country was always possible with those ideas, but the possibility of explain to the people, to our students later, what is geography and what are their possibilities, potentialities, was a little bit limited.
Yes.
Then in 1975, some young generation of geographers thought about other alternatives to study geography. Mm-hmm. I mean, to try to get to other countries and to have another vision of geography. Yes. And then it was very interesting because most of us then choose some countries, for instance, United States, Canada, and Germany.
But not France.
Not France.
Why?
Yes. I think that the reason is because most of us try to rebel against our formation. Yes. You know, a sort of interest to change the things and yes. to change geography. Mm-hmm. And perhaps it was quite wrong, the idea, you know. Mm-hmm. But we thought that it was correct, right? Mm-hmm. In my personal case, I came to England. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we have a lot of problems to try to perform these studies because for instance, the possibility to get a scholarship
Yes.
was always very difficult,
Yes.
mainly in geography. Perhaps in engineering and in medicine could be possible, but in geography, most of the representatives in our country from different European, for instance, countries were so surprised because why you decided to study geography?
Yes.
Perhaps it's not useful for the country.
Yes.
Then, in my personal case, for instance, I had to select applied geography, mainly from agricultural point of view.
I see.
And then I came to England, and I got my MA, Master of Science in agricultural engineering.
Where?
In Cranfield Institute of Technology in Bedfordshire. In Bedfordshire. But my personal interest wasn't exactly agricultural engineering. You know, my personal interest was mainly to try to understand why geography was as it was in Chile. What can we do for change geography, for introduce new methodologies, new theories about geography,
and to make it practically useful also.
Yes, also. But first of all, to try to understand what geography is and how can it develop in the country. Then, around the 80s, this group of people began to come back to Chile. And then most of us began to have some meetings, how can now do for geography in my country. And fortunately, I think that in most of the universities, those ideas has been understood. Yes. And then we, in some occasions, we have had the real opportunity in the last years to introduce the new ideas.
Now, how many universities are we talking about?
Well, in Santiago there are 3 universities, the Catholic University and 2 universities from the state. One is the University of Santiago and the other the University of Chile. The University of Chile was the larger one because it had a lot of regional universities under its command.
Yes.
But in the last years, because some legal reformation, the University of Chile is now mainly in Santiago. But some groups of geographers have at the same time created new departments along the country. And it is also a very interesting point of view. It was also in the 60s some attempts to create regional universities or regional department of geography. I think now there are again this possibility. And there is also a university in the north of Chile, in the desert area, which is mainly devoted to arid studies, which is the University of the North, the Universidad del Norte, and there is also one university in the south of Chile, Universidad Austral de Valdivia, and the University of Concepción.
Yes.
And we have some groups along the country. My country is very special country from the point of view, from the geographical point of view. It's a very long country.
Yes.
It's around 4,200 kilometers from the north to the south. Then we have all the landscapes that you can imagine, from the extreme deserts to the very, very rainfall regions in the south. Then I think that for all the people of my country, geography is one clear reality.
Yes.
You can experience all the landscapes during your lives, living in different parts of the country. And perhaps there is a clear potentiality to our science. And then I think that in the last years there are new ideas, new statesmen to develop geography, in spite of other social and political problems, which are also very important in Latin America, and especially in my country. I think that perhaps this is also an interesting point, because I began my answer talking about professors who are not in Chile now. Perhaps you realize.
I wonder why they're not. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Perhaps one of the most important problems to the continuity of geography,
Yes.
not only in Chile, also I think in all Latin America,
other countries.
yes, is this sort of interruption, because the people is, but there are some people interested in the science, then they came to some European or other countries, they got some experience, some academics preparation, they come back to Chile, but they don't know exactly what about the institutions, what
Yes.
about the political changes.
Yes.
And sometimes, for instance, they did a lot, but unfortunately, because some prejudice about the person, the people, and about their ideas, they have to migrate.
Yes.
And it is very, very, very complicated for the development of the science.
Yes.
Because, for instance, the last experience, I think that is very important. In 1973, most of the people, most of the professors, migrate. They come to different countries. Sometimes like political exiles.
Yes.
Another case because economic reasons,
Yes.
because they lost their jobs, for instance. And then it was around 10 years between they left the country and when a new generation was able to replace them. No, it's
Yes,
that sort of thing
interesting.
has been very common in Latin America. No?
Yes.
And it not depends of geography.
No, it's
it depends
everything.
of the milieu, the
Yes.
context, the political context.
Yes, yes.
I think that, for instance, we have had a lot of different governments in the
Yes.
country, different ideologies. But you cannot find those ideologies reflected in geography.
No.
I mean that perhaps it wasn't a real contact between ideology, politics, and geography.
There hasn't been.
No.
Not really?
Not really.
You mean geographers have not been used as government advisors and so forth?
Sometimes.
But not to the extent
yes,
as in
not,
other countries.
yes.
That's
I mean that it's not possible to responsibilize geography for the sorts of those people, you know.
Oh, well, I
Yes.
presume most people wouldn't. But now during the early years, during the years of French influence
Yeah.
and regionalism,
Yes.
You mean that there was no contact, ideological
Yeah.
contact between practicing geographers
Yes.
and the government?
Yes. Well, I think that regional geography in my country was mainly a sort of adaptation of the original geography, original regional geography. I mean that the people tried to describe the areal differentiation in my country, which is so important, you know.
Yes.
Then I think that culturally was very important, that sort of description. But when in the middle of the 60s, the ideology was mainly towards planning.
Yes.
Then in my country were some regionalists from different parts of the world working in the possibility to regionalize the country
Yes.
and to introduce planning practices.
Yes.
And then perhaps at that time, I mean in the, for instance, 60, 65, 67, it was, I think, a difference, a gap between the interest of the government for regional planning and regional description from geography.
More than just the clash of the old regional description and the new regional science.
Yes, that's
it was
right.
bigger than that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and when in 67, the National Planning Board was founded, the Oficina Nacional de Planificación. Some geographers were called to work in regional planning, and sometimes they began to work in regional agencies in this kind of problem. And there is another point very interesting from the experience of geography, the practice of geography. I mean. In 1960s was a very terrible earthquake in Chile.
Yes,
Yeah?
yes.
especially in the central part and southern part of Chile. And by this reason, the OEA, which means
OAS.
yes, OAS, a state organization, American state organization, and the International Bank were trying to. They did, in fact, a very complete survey of the country through air photography. It was the first time the country was completely surveyed, yes. And again, it was a very important material for geographers, yes. And this kind of project, which is called PAF, Proyecto Aerofotogramétrico, was later replaced by an organism which was called Instituto de Recursos Naturales, Natural Resources Institute. And then in that institute was a very important group of geographers working in practice, mainly in land surveying, land resources management, land evaluation, and trying to introduce projects according to the environment. Yes. You realize that it's very varied environment, and then they have to manage the problem with carefully. And the third point, perhaps in practice of geography, is teaching. And especially in the secondary school. Yes. But anyway, I think that is. It is a very important point because in my country geography is not, of course, very popular science. And one of the main causes, I think, is because it is not very well taught at the secondary school. Schools, perhaps it's the only way that people, citizens of the country, can know geography. But if they don't receive a very good education in geography, they are not prepared to understand what the science is. And then perhaps we have to do more in the teaching of geography to improve the situation.
The curriculum of secondary schools, is this something laid down by the Ministry of Education?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So it would be a national project that you would envision for the improvement of education?
Yes. I think that in the last years it had been some projects to improve the teaching of geography, not only of geography, perhaps also in history. I think that the government realized that people definitely don't know geography and history of the country, and perhaps they cannot understand the situation. And they tried to introduce some improvements in the secondary school. And now it's very interesting. There is a special test to go in the university, and it is about geography and history of Chile. And then I think that is very, very important for us because there is a clear opportunity to improve and to introduce geography at the secondary school in a very well way, because the students are going to need geography as a matter to go to the university. And it is very socially very important in the country, because most of the people like to go to the university. It's the more important idea in the students to go to the university and to be professionals.
Is it still?
Yes, it's still.
That's very interesting.
Then it's an important intermediate point that most of the people have to study geography. But now, what geography we are going to?
What kind of geography?
Yes, what kind of geography?
Yes. But you dropped a little point there, at least I missed it. You were saying that during the 60s, after this earthquake, and the aerial photographic survey and so on, there were people working then.
Yes.
Did that include your 3 professors?
Yeah.
And when did they leave?
Well, since 1973, the things changed drastically in my country. Yes. And it means, for instance, that from the economic point of view, now was a free market economy very strong free market economy. And then geographers who were working in planning were, they lost their job because the orientation of the planning office board was quite different, yes. Mainly only from the economic point of view. Then the same thing I think with environment problems. The new economy tried to, they didn't worry about environment or something like that. They prefer only economy. And then also geographers, because political reasons on one hand, and on the other hand, because the new vision of economy mainly, they were, I think, forced to leave the country. And they live in practice, and you can find them in very different countries in the world.
Yes. But the timing of the return of people of your generation now,
yes, yeah.
About what year would that be?
Around 1975.
So it wasn't a long gap, really.
Yes.
And did you begin with something quite fresh, or did you pick up the kind of geography that had been there in the 60s?
Yeah.
With some fresh...
yes. I think that we were in condition to introduce new ideas, new methods, and for instance, quantitative methodologies and new ways of solving problems, something like that. I think that the new generation has meant two things very important. First of all, the possibility to do, I think, better geography than before, especially from the methodological point of view. And the second point, which has been also very important, is that most of the students, most of the professors now, were looking for new theoretical alternatives in geography. And I think that in the last years you can realize that there are other possibilities. For instance, some people is talking about humanistic geography, and another people is talking about radical geography, and other people is talking about possibilism in geography, quantitative methodologies in geography. And I think that it is very important, because one of the points considering the historical experience is try to create a sort of democracy in geography. It's very important. And democracy in geography for us meant that everybody can have the opportunity to develop their own ideas. And I mean that regionalistic point of view was perhaps very dogmatic and very excluding in relation to other possibilities. If you think that in this end of the 60s, we were only talking about regional geography. We didn't know anything about other possibilities of the science. Then, now, one of the main tasks that we have assumed is to develop this kind of democracy in geography. And then I think that especially for the new generations, it's going to be very important to have new possibilities to interpret the reality and to look for through geography, but from different points of view.
But now in your own personal experience, you went to England and studied agricultural engineering.
Yes.
Were you able to use that when you went back to Chile?
Yes. Well, I use it. For instance, at this moment, there is an important project in colonization in the south of Chile. We wish to incorporate new areas to the development, and then apply geography in this case, because I studied effectively agriculture engineering, but my professor in England was a man who works in erosion and geomorphology, and especially in land reclamation and land management. He's a geographer. Then when I came back to Chile, I tried to introduce land resources management, environmental impact assessment, and everything which is important in the allocation of new projects considering environmental restriction. And then I am now working on this point, but at the same time, when I was in England and when the other professors were in other countries, they tried to catch also to pick up the different ideas, not only the techniques, not only the new methodologies, also new ideas, new theories to interpret our reality. It's quite important, I think, to link both aspects.
And institutionally speaking, you geographers have liberty to choose what you teach and what you do? No?
Yes.
It's quite free.
Yes.
What are your other interests besides applied geography? You are interested in the history of geographic thought.
Yes. The history of geography in our countries is a short history, but anyways, it's very important. If we are interested in explain why regionalism was as it was and everything, we have to know the recent history. Geography in Chile, in fact, began in the beginning of the century.
Yes,
it was created in the university. The Department of Geography was created around 1920. Then it is an important science in the university.
And that was from French influence.
Yes, French and German influence. Yes, and later on in 1947 was created an Institute of Geography, which was especially devoted to research in geography. And later on, of course, the new regional universities have also created departments of geography. And the interest in the history of geography is trying to understand why geography has not been a successful science in our country, and try to get the weak points and try to improve it. No?
What have you come up with by way of hypothesis?
Pardon?
What is your hunch about why?
Why? I think that perhaps a sort of important difference between the academic geography in the university, very close in the universities, and the reality. And then the possibility to explain reality and to improve reality. And I think that that is important. That is an important point. Perhaps geography have had opportunities in Chile or Latin America to participate in the development. But my personal idea is that sometimes geography was not, and geographers were not prepared to participate effectively.
Yes.
Then I think that we can get important ideas from the history of geography, and especially from the comparison between geography in different Latin American countries, between Latin American countries and Spanish-speaking. Yes, Spanish-speaking geographers, and also, of course, between the comparison between our geography and also Spain geography and European geography.
You think you have cut your ties at all with the European sort of master thinkers? You think there will be a Chilean school of thought one day?
I hope.
Yes?
But not only I hope that it could be a Chilean geography school, I think that Latin America could be an interesting point of view. We have very similarities with other countries, especially from the geographical history of geography. I think that the case of Chile is very similar to other countries, for instance, Peru and perhaps Bolivia and Venezuela, Colombia. In fact, we have had some meetings with those geographers, and we got the idea that there are some similarities, at the same time that there are, of course, some differences, very important difference. But the ideological and political context is very is supranational. I mean, it's over the nations, the different countries. And then, for instance, the planning programs were applied in all Latin America. And then in most of the countries began a free market economy. And then you can find that there are some ideas which are continental. And then geography responds to this context. And then there are some similarities between the countries, and if we are able to understand this point, and at the same time to realize about our weakness, well, we can, I think, to create some sort of a theory to explain reality, which is quite different in Latin America in relation with other countries, and perhaps to link our geography with the geography of the other underdeveloped continents, since the possibility of make comparison between Africa, Latin America is also very important. And then perhaps in some time to create a new vision about our science and to create some sort of a school of thought could be very, very interesting. But anyway, I think that to advance in this direction it's very important to have a clear contact with philosophers, social scientists, and other people who can also give important ideas to theorize about our reality.
But Hugo, you criticized to some extent the French tradition, to some extent, because it wasn't explanatory. And yet you described Chile as being a country of enormous variability. So on the one hand, it is a perfect place for contextually sensitive regional geography, but you feel that's not the way to improve the subject. The way to improve it is to introduce new ideas, develop theories which would have a general application throughout, and possibly give points of contact with the other Latin American countries. If you were to choose between the direction of improvement, would you choose something that would bring Chile into the international stream of thinking, or would you choose something which would make Chile understand its own reality better?
Yes, I think that perhaps I was a little strong in my opinions. I have had different ideas about this sort of regional geography. I think that in the beginning of my understanding of that kind of geography was so wrong. I mean that I received something which was called regional geography, and I realized that some French people was working on that idea. But when I have reviewed different articles during the last 30 years, looking for the meaning of regional geography, it has been a very difficult task. I think that it was also only some sort of national adaptation to the ideas. But in fact, I don't think that there is an authentic regional geography in my country. But anyway, I think that geography was able, with some limitations, to reflect different landscapes, different realities. And it means that from the cultural point of view was important. And in the middle of the 60s, 1965, I think, it was published the most important collection of geographical books in the country, and which was founded by an economics foundation, which has been very important in the industrialization in my country, Corfo, Corporación de Fomento de la Producción. It was very important since the 40s, creating industries, and they decided to publish an economic geography in the middle of the 60s. Then I think that it was some sort of culmination of the regional vision in the country. Then my critics, if can be understood in this way, is mainly that perhaps this kind of hagiographical description was unable to participate in some sort of urgent application of geography. I think that methodological, we were not prepared to participate, because we were perhaps very good in description of the situation, but we were unable to prepare good diagnostics, new an analysis from the realities, and then to apport our ideas to economics, for instance. And perhaps it was also some problems with the languages. For instance, we were not prepared in mathematics, not in statistics, and not in a lot of things which are very important. Now, but the point is, I think that in this pluralism, I think that regionalism and every other alternative have to have the same opportunity. I mean that perhaps a real understanding of regionalism is quite important in the country. Yes. And the new idea, for instance, from idealistic regionalism and humanistic regionalism, to try to discover the personality of the place, and for instance, to try to understand some sort of cultural attitude which is very particular in my country. My country is in the corner of the world, you know. Yes. I explained you that to arrive here, I have to fly 30 hours. It's a very long. My country is very far from everything. Okay, then I think that there is in the Chilean people a special topophilia.
Yes, I would imagine.
Yes, because we have the ocean on one side, and in the south, the South Pole and the Antarctic, and in the other, the most important high mountains in the Andes, and in the north, the desert. Yes. We have some sort of isolation, natural isolation, and then we are created some special vision about the world, about about everything. Yes. Then I think that the interpretation of this kind of geographical attitude is quite important. And I think that the humanistic geography, for instance, can do a lot of things, trying to understand why people move, the different kind of people. In fact, we don't have very strong regionalism in the people, but for instance, we have all the people have the same language, but we have some minorities, Indian minorities, very small, I think, but they are there, and we have, however, some special kind of people. For instance, miners. They are very important in the country, and we have, for instance, a small miner which is called Pirquinero. This is a family. This is a group of persons who migrate all the year looking for a special mining. And this kind of people, they have their geographical vision. They are the very particular geographical attitude, and I think that we have to explain it. We have to understand it before to begin to change the things.
Exactly.
And in this sense, I think that regionalism has very clear and good opportunity in the country to contribute to explain reality. And the same with humanistic geography, and of course, other possibilities. For instance, radical geography. My country is also an underdeveloped country, and we have a lot of social contradictions and a lot of things, the human contradictions, a difference between the different regions in the country, and everything. And I think to explain from this point of view is also right, and it means a good contribution to the reality. And the same with perhaps another theoretical and practical point of view.
Do you know Manfred Max Neff?
No, unfortunately.
Sweden gave him a prize. He's from Chile, and he has developed a very innovative approach to economic development. I wondered if you saw some rapport between applied geography and the kind of work that he's doing.
Well, in relation with your idea, I think that there is also a point very important. It is the language problem.
Yes.
Well, you realize that I have a lot of problems because I was in England several years ago, and then we don't have opportunity to speak in another language, and at the same time our students are not able to read and to speak and to talk about in England in English or French or other languages, and one of the problems has been that we don't receive enough information. We don't have enough information about geography in the rest of the world. At the same time, there is a connection, very, very clear connection. Mainly French authors were translated to Spanish, and from Spain to Latin America. It's a very straightforward way to arrive to our culture. And perhaps now there are other possibilities to receive other books written in other languages, and they are now being translated to Spanish. I think is also an important point, and the knowledge of the different authors is quite important, especially if we are interested in pluralism.
Yes, and that is your vision of it, a pluralistic kind of geography. Well, we look forward to the developments in Chile and wish you all good speed on it, and look forward to meeting at our next International Congress.
Well, I hope it's very important to participate in the Congress, and then to have an access to the people. And I talked recently with Professor Hagenstam, for instance. I told him that there are some people working his ideas in Peru, for instance, or in Chile, and also your ideas are in this moment being working. I think this is a very important point.
Well, let's keep our lines open, because we have a lot to learn from Chile and Chilean experience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.